Welcome to Microsoft 365 Saturday Madrid Virtual. My name is Chris Hoard. I'm a partner education lead at Vusion in the UK, and my session today is Microsoft Teams Loves Microsoft Lists. Now, just before the session starts, I would like to have a shout out to the organizers, Adrian, Juan Carlos, and Farron, to say thank you for inviting me, but also thank you to the sponsors for making this event possible. This is the second time I've spoken at 365 Madrid, and I'm really happy to be back. So what to expect from today? We're going to break it down into three parts. Firstly, we're going to look at what Microsoft Lists are. Secondly, how Microsoft Lists work with Microsoft Teams. And thirdly, what's next and up and coming on the roadmap. Now, just some things to bear in mind. The level is 100 to 200, which means it's an introductory session. It's not going to go too far into the reads, but it would be helpful if you have a working knowledge of Microsoft Teams. Secondly, to the scope, this session focuses on integration with Teams as opposed to the core web app experience. And third of all, the longevity. Microsoft Lists and Microsoft Teams are rapidly developing. So what that means is that this session is going to be valid for 6 to 8 weeks, and at that point we could be having a different experience, or there should certainly be features that are added. So let's start off on the session with what a Microsoft List. So Microsoft List is a Microsoft 365 app that's designed to help you track information and organize work. In other words, it's an app that's designed to help you create and manage lists within Microsoft 365. Now, lists themselves aren't exactly brand new. They come from SharePoint lists. SharePoint lists have been around a long time. Microsoft 365 lists is an evolution of that. It encompasses SharePoint lists, and it's really about bringing lists throughout the Microsoft 365 stack. So Microsoft Lists was publicly announced at Build 2020 and is currently in a state of rolling out. The core web app experience was the first to come along, and that was deployed in July. We then had the integration of Teams in September. We're now in the public beta of the iOS mobile app, with GA expected to come along in December. So it is accessible today as a web app and through Teams. The beta is ongoing for the mobile app, but I think that serves to show that Microsoft Lists can be accessed in a number of ways. Now, in terms of its integration with Teams, Microsoft Teams is the hub for teamwork. We're bringing together chat, we're bringing together meetings and calling apps, and we're also bringing together lists. Now, Lists is the app which helps us create and manage lists on a day-to-day basis. So it's the ability to create and manage lists within Teams by the whole team. Now, I've put through simple scenarios on the top right to help us visualize how they will work together. So let's take the first one. I want a list of mobile devices my team manage in order to be able to track and manage them. In other words, I want to be a list for mobile devices. This will have a lot of different attributes about the devices, including their operating system, whether they're an iOS or Android. That list will probably also show who manages that, who last serviced it, is that mobile phone updated, and whether it's a device that the user owns or the organization owns. So it's about taking that list and having the whole team manage that within Microsoft Teams. That's an inventory scenario. The second scenario, I want to create a list of repeatable steps my team must take to launch at any online event. So imagine that I'm managing a marketing team, and I want my team to go through a number of steps that they have to go through in order to be able to set up an online event. A list is perfect for that. We can make that transparent and surface that within Microsoft Teams. And those are two very simple scenarios, but there is a whole totally different load of use cases, such as issue tracking, itineraries, contact lists, contract renewals, roadmaps, KPIs. The limit is really defined by your imagination in this. Now, when considering alternatives to Microsoft Lists within Teams, because there are other third-party applications that can also build lists, we're thinking about apps such as Asana, Wrike, and Monday.com. But Lists has been designed as a native application to be able to create and manage lists. And when we surface that into teams, the team can collaborate on those lists. They can build those lists together. They can manage those lists together. Now, we've talked about a couple of those alternative applications, but it's also really important if lists are going to be used effectively to be able to distinguish them from other applications within the Microsoft 365 stack. I've been getting asked a lot of questions over the last few months. Can we use lists for tasks within Microsoft Lists and within Microsoft Teams? And the kind of the short answer is that you can use lists for tasks, but would you? You can, but should you? And I would say that tasks and lists are pretty distinct from both a definition perspective that you will see on the left-hand side, and also, I guess quite importantly, Microsoft distinguishes lists from the task applications within inside Microsoft 365. So for lists, you have Microsoft Lists. For tasks, you have Microsoft Planner for Teams tasks, and you have Microsoft To Do for personal tasks. You also have the task app within Microsoft Teams. So I guess from Microsoft's perspective, those are pretty distinct, and there have been studies by third parties such as AvePoint, which has done a nice compare chart that you can see there on the right hand side to show the functionality between lists, planner, to do, and tasks in Microsoft Teams for actually using and managing tasks. I think this is really important to say from the beginning, because we want to ensure that when we're starting to use lists both within our organization and with Microsoft Teams, and we start collaboratively using lists, we should make sure exactly what lists is supposed to be used for, whereas we might say to our users, hey, you've already got other applications to do other things. So some of the other important things to understand before getting to the integration between lists and teams is the prerequisites, what we need to get going. So to be able to use lists all up, you need an Office or Microsoft 365 plan, and you need to have SharePoint enabled. That is the minimum in order to be able to use the web application. So say we weren't using it for Teams or mobile and just using a web app, that's what we would need. And if you want the features in early, then you would set your Microsoft 365 tenant or subset of users to a targeted release. Now, surfacing lists within Microsoft Teams, we need to have our users enabled for Teams, but we also need to ensure that they can create and manage those lists within a team. So we need to ensure that lists is possible within the app permission policies, and we also need to make sure that our users within the team have the permissions to go and create the app within a Teams channel. So by default, the app permission policy in a tenant is on, and when you create a team, it's default to allow people to create apps. So you might not come across this issue, but in case you're not able to create lists today, then those might be one of the issues, and you might need to see your administrator. If you want to go on and use list within the mobile app, then you would of course need App Store access and install rights. Most people have that on their own devices, but if your device is managed, again, you might need to go and see your administrator. So in addition to prerequisites, it's also good to know where the list data is stored, because it's not stored in Teams. The data in Microsoft Lists, generally speaking, is stored in SharePoint. Now, this brings us on to the two different types of lists you can create with the list application. The first type of lists you can create within Microsoft Lists are personal lists, lists for an individual. If you go into the web app, you will be able to create them. However, you can't create personal lists in Microsoft Teams. But when you create those personal lists, that data is stored within SharePoint. In terms of the lists you create within Microsoft Teams, these are team lists, all lists for a team. Now you can create them in the web app, but you can also create them within Microsoft Teams. And those lists and all of their data are stored within SharePoint. The comments you can put on lists they are either, depending upon what type of list you can create. But there is a caveat here, and that is, as we will show you later, when you have a discussion on a list item in the Teams UI, that is actually stored in Azure. So that element is not stored within SharePoint. So it's just to bear that in mind. Finally, how do we surface lists in Teams? So this is a little bit about how we actually get those lists in Teams, and will inform you about the experience. So when we create lists, we create them as tabs within Teams channels. We do not, and they cannot be created as personal apps, as in apps that sit on the left-hand app rail. They are not messaging extensions. They are not connectors. At this current time, the lists application within Microsoft Teams is simply an application that can be surfaced as tabs within channels. Maybe later on in the development cycle, we will see that personal app where you can manage all of your personal lists and all of your Teams lists from a personal app in the left rail. But today, lists is simply all about tabs. And as said previously, it's about Teams lists, not personal lists. Personal lists cannot be either managed or added within Microsoft Teams. So that's a little bit of the theory. That's just kind of going over what lists is all about. It's a Microsoft 365 application used to track and organize your work. It's for creating and managing lists, and we bring them into Teams so that the team can collaboratively work on the list. They can create lists within the team. They can manage the lists amongst all or a few members of that team. So let's get on to how the lists and work with Teams. And I guess starting off, 101 is about how we add a list to the team, and there are several ways to do this. We can do this in a new channel tab. We can do it on the app rail. We can do it in the App Store. So let's just go and dive into the demo environment and take a look. The main way that you will probably add lists to start with is to add them as tabs in a channel. So here I am in my team and I'm in the general channel, and I click the add icon, and as you can see, I've got lists. I can also search for it. So if I just type in lists and then go to add, it will then, if I click save, add list, and I will begin to be able to create or add an existing list. So there I can add it as a tab into the channel. I can also add it from the app rail. So if I was to go lists, I can then add the list to the team, and it will go through the same process. So I will be asked to select a channel, and once I've selected channel and set up, it will add it as a tab. So you have tabs, you've got the app rail. I can also add it through the App Store. So if I search for lists, I can add a list there. I can even add lists to channels through the command bar. So there are several different ways with which to initialize and start adding lists to channels within Microsoft Teams. Now, how do we create a list? Well, we can create a list in 4 different ways. We have a blank list from Excel, from an existing list, or from a template. We're going to go through each one of these, starting with the blank list, which is creating a list from scratch. So if I come into my demo environment and I go back to my Teams channel, you will see I'm ready to set up a list, and I'm going to go and create that list. And the 4 options are there in front of me. If I click on blank list, I will be able to start creating a list straight away. I'm going to name it Madrid Demo. I'm going to give it a description. I'm going to then choose a color. I'm going to choose an icon. I'm going to list. And as you can see, literally within 5 seconds, that list has now been created. It's a blank list, as said, is from scratch, but I can begin to start adding my columns. So I'm going to create a list here to do with an online event that I'm running. I want to put all of the sessions in. So I've got the title, which I can use for the title of my session. I can add a list. So I'm going to call that the track, as in the tracks for the session. I'm going to then add another column, which is a person column for the speaker. I'm going to then add another column, and I'm going to call this a hyperlink column for the join link, because I want to have these sessions in Microsoft Teams. So I've created my column. I can then go and start adding my items. So I'm going to call this Teams Adoption Session 1. The track is adoption. The speaker is somebody in my tenant, Vesku Nopenen. And then the join link, https teamsnation.online/room1. That is the link that I'm giving to my Microsoft Teams meeting. And then I click save. And there we go. I've created my list item within my list. I can go on to create more sessions. And if you note with the column, there are many different columns that you can create, whether that's a single line of text, a location, a number, a choice column, a hyperlink for a URL. People who have used SharePoint lists are going to be very familiar with this. So spend a little time when you start using lists getting to know and get familiar with those columns. So that's the blank list, setting it up from scratch. We also have the ability to upload from an existing Excel. So if I go to create my list again, okay, accidentally clicked flow. I'm going to create my list again. And then I go to create list and I go from Excel. This we can either upload from our computer, or we can look with inside our team, or should I say our underlying SharePoint site, to be able to import that Excel with our list and list data on it. So I've created one in advance. This is called the equipment list. If I click next, you will see that that's thinking about it. And then you can see that those are my columns, table, single line, two single line of text. And then we have title, vendor, and owner. And here is all my pre-populated data. So I've taken some time before I create the list to build out that list on the Excel. And now I'm importing it. So we might want to create our list on Excel before we upload. It could potentially save us some time in doing so. So I select next, and again, I give it a name, a potential description, a color, and an icon, and then I create that list. It will take a little bit of time depending upon how much data is there in the list. See, there we go. There is my list. Now, one thing to note about this method is that when you're creating that in the Excel, to make sure you format it as a table. Otherwise, you might have issues with uploading. So just make sure you format that as a table. So that's the second way to create the list. The third is that we can create a list from an existing list, and that can be anywhere across our tenant, assuming that we have permissions on the other list. So if I click on add again and I go to lists and I click save, I then go to create a list. I then go to from the existing list, and there we go. Those are all of the underlying sites that I have access to. I'm going to just keep the one that I'm already in. So this is the list team with the underlying SharePoint site. I've got 3 lists already in there. I'm just going to clone one and then click next. And again, I will go through the process of the name, the description, the color, and the icon. And then I'm going to create. So by creating that, just to know, if you're creating a list from another list, it doesn't copy the data over. What it copies is the columns. So this can be really effective from if you think of copying as from an existing list as cloning the column headings, then that gives you a direction on that. Last but not least, we have create a list from a template. So these are a load of pre-designed templates from Microsoft. If I go again to create and I go to lists and then I go to create, Microsoft have pre-populated a lot of templates for use cases that are very easy to get started with. I might not want to have to build all the column headings. I might just want a template to put in that will save me a lot of time in terms of setting it up. So I have, if let's say I want to use the issue tracker, I can have a peek at all that information. You can see there all the different fields. I've got a RAG status for each one of my issues, which looks very effective, who it's assigned to, and who it's logged by. I just simply click on use template and then fill out again the name, the description, the color, and the icon, and then click create. And like creating it from an existing list, what the template does, it doesn't give you any kind of pre-populated data. It then gives you all of the column headings in that template. You can go ahead and start creating those new items. So there are many different ways to create a list. I would recommend testing out all of them to find out which one's right for you, or indeed the way you create them could be based on your situation. You might create that first list by blank and then go on and create subsequent lists from that existing list, for example. You have to find out which way is right for you. Now, in terms of having favorite lists, this isn't possible within Teams in the way that it is in the web app. In the web app, if I go out to it, it is very easy to be able to favorite a list. So you can see there, I've got favorites right at the top of the web app. And if I want to add it to that favorites list, I would just click the star on the top right-hand corner of the list. So there we go. I want to add Teams list 2 to the favorites. So I just come along and click the star if I want to remove it. And there's many reasons to favorite lists. We could have been using the list earlier on in the day and want to come back to it in order to work on it, because we might need it to have stepped away if we're frequently using that list on a day-to-day basis, or just simply if the list is of interest and I want to kind of keep an eye on it and look through it, then now those are all reasons to favorite lists. So how do we do that in Teams? There is a way around this. So whilst I can't just click a star and favorite it, what I can is create a channel in a team, call it favorite lists, and it can be a public or a private channel. I've created it here as a private channel. I go and add lists as a tab. So I'm going to add one of my favorite lists now. I'm going to go but I'm not going to create it. I'm going to add an existing list because that list already exists. Now it says here to use a SharePoint link. What does that mean? Well, what it means is it's the URL. So it's asking you to put in the URL of the list within the SharePoint site. So I'm just going to take a copy there. You can see it's all the way up to the question mark, so the .aspx, and then I come and I enter that link there, and then I click add, and if I've got permissions over it, then the list is going to surface. Now I can do that essentially for multiple lists and have all of my favorite lists or all of the lists that I'm working on together there in a single defined channel. That's the way that we can almost create a favorite area within Microsoft Teams. A bit of a workaround, and maybe Microsoft will develop that in the future. In terms of sharing a list in Teams, we can share a list, we can share a list item. This is quite easy to do so, but having a demonstration really helps, because let's say that I have a list within inside my team that I want to share with somebody either inside or outside of my business. Here's a list that I've pre-populated earlier. It's a list that's about an online event, and as you can see here, it has a number of sessions, it has join links, tracks, it has date and time. I want to share this link with somebody outside my organization. I can easily do so by coming up here to this information icon in the right hand corner. I click it, and you will see here, if I click on manage access, nothing to be seen where I can add users, because the add user button, even though it's not explicit, is right here. It's this purple button. So if we want to add somebody to be able to share that list, we have to first of all click on add person, and there we go. You will see grant access. So I'm just gonna add this to somebody outside of my environment. There we go. And I'm going to set whether they can edit, full control, or can view. I'm going to say just that they can view the list, and I'm going to put a comment in here. So hi, you can now view the list, and then I'm going to grant them access. So they will get an email saying that they can then go on to be able to view the list, and they would follow the instructions there. Now, you can manage access of people who you've given access to. So you can see here, I've got a couple of users outside of my organization who are already, if I just hover over that, viewing that. If I want to change their access, I can simply by clicking on the icon or the drop down and changing whether that's can view, can edit, or they've got full control. I can also stop sharing with them. So if I want to revoke access to that list from Teams, I absolutely can do so. So that's sharing a whole list. We would simply come up to the information icon and start the sharing process from there. What happens if we want to share a list item? Well, this is a little bit different. We actually go to the list item within the list, and we click on these three little dots, which is the more actions, and then we can either copy a link or we can select manage access. So by managing access, we can provide a link or we can give them direct access. Again, you can see here, I've added somebody outside of the organization so that they can have access to the list item. We would give access to the list item when we don't want people to view all of the items on the list. So we can make sharing more granular. So that's the way that we can either share whole lists or share list items. Now, as you can see, the permissions is edit permissions, read permissions, or full control. Now, when we're in Teams, we just have to think about the kind of concept of team members and guests. So by default, team members have edit permissions. By default, guests have read permissions. If I come back into my demo environment and I think about sharing the whole list, and I go to manage access, you can see there, list owners has got full control, list visitors, who are the guests, okay, they can view, and list members who are members of the team have edit by default. But you can come along and you can change that should you need. And finally, about sharing, sharing is controlled in the sharing sharing center. So you can see here, it is under policies and then sharing. If you click on sharing, it will come to this page, which is all about external sharing. You can control, this controls the sharing of lists within Teams. It controls the list of sharing lists within SharePoint too. So you would set that. And the Teams lists would be controlled specifically by the SharePoint because they are housed within SharePoint. Personal lists, remember, are within OneDrive. So everything is controlled by there, and lists and sharing can be managed centrally. In terms of customizing a list, we're referring to renaming or restyling a list. This isn't possible within Teams. It is possible within the web app. So if I come to the web app and I go to all of my lists, let's say that I want to rename one of these lists. I'm just going to take this list here, this Legends list. I'd come down to more options and customize that, and I can change the name. So for example, I wanted to change that to Legends List 2020 because that was a typo. I wanted to change the color whilst I was at it. I can then save it. Okay, go back 2 seconds. We'll try that again. So I'll just reload that up. Go to customize. Okay. See if that goes or if that's not going to go again. There we go. So now it's taken. You can see that it's changed to 2020 and my typo has been corrected. However, this doesn't pull through to Microsoft Teams. So if I go into Microsoft Teams, okay, and I had a tab that was called Legends List 2021 as it was before, it would not show a change. So there is a little bit of a disconnection between name changes in the List web app and within Microsoft Teams. So it's recommended that if you do a name change and customize within the List web app, then you would come into Teams, you would remove the tab, and then you would re-add it. That is the recommendation when doing any customizations to lists. Moving on, if you ever need to export a list, this is a really easy operation. We would export lists because we want to review that list offline. We would want to make some revisions and then potentially recreate and re-import that via Excel, or simply we would like to have a local backup of the list. Any one of those use cases is valid. In order to be able to do that within Teams, let me just come off of the list item. I just go to my list, and then what I would do is click the more options, export to the Excel, and that would then download an IQY file, which would then open in Excel. So it's going to open in Excel. I would enable. It would ask me to enter an address. So I'm just going to enter my demo address. So this is the one that I've spun up. There we go. And that's what the IQY file would look like with all of the information on it. So exporting to Excel is a really easy operation. A few clicks and you've got the IQY file. In terms of deleting or restoring a list, again, this is relatively simple, but you cannot delete the list within Microsoft Teams. So let's go back to our demo environment. Let's say that I want to delete, I've just created, let's say that I want to delete Madrid Demo 1. I would come into the Files tab here. I would then go to Open in SharePoint. So we would need to go to the underlying SharePoint site. Okay. What we would then do is then go to the contents. Okay. And you would see that you have all of our lists that are right there. This is the one that I want to remove, which is lists. I then click on the list settings. I would then delete the list. So you see, we can get to it through Microsoft Teams, but it's probably advisable that a quicker way to do it would be through the web app. So again, if I was going into Microsoft Lists, let me just refresh the page so that all my new lists are up. Let's take one that we created earlier, the equipment list. I want to delete that. I would simply select it. I would then click on the cog at the top. I would select list settings, and I'm right there at that page where I can then delete that list. So let me just, I can delete the list. In terms of restoring lists, because they're housed within SharePoint, when you delete a list, it will go into the SharePoint site recycle bin. So let me just go into the recycle bin. You can see that the one that I just deleted was in there, including several ones earlier. So all I need to do is click on it and click restore. Then that list will be back up and running and available within Microsoft Teams. Deleting and restoring, as you can see, is really kind of quite straightforward. And also as well, the deletion policy and the restore policies are again all governed by SharePoint. Now, moving beyond the list to moving like kind of into the list, we have filters, we have views. With filters, we can splice up how we want to view the actual list. So let me get back into my team. Let me get it to the list. I can then choose to go to the filter, and then I can filter that list how I would like. So let's say that I want to have sessions that are only from Adam. I just click on Adam, and there we go. I can see all of the sessions within this list that Adam is speaking in. I could also as well do it based on title or by any one of the, click on the column itself. When I go to the column settings, actually pin it in the actual pane itself. So I can move kind of most columns in and out of the filters in order to be able to give me specific views that I need of that list at a given time. In addition to filters, there are different ways to view lists. We have list view, we have compact list view, and we have gallery. So 3 ways. We go to the all items here. Here's my list view. The default is the list view. So when you click on a tab, it will normally default to the list view. I've got out of the box compact list. So this just compresses it down so that you can see more list items within Microsoft Teams. You also gallery. Gallery gives you a card style view, a really different way of looking at your list items. So those are 3 out of the box. Gallery was just recently introduced, and we're also going to get calendar view in the near future as well. We also have grid view when we want to edit our items. So grid view is similar to the list view. Grid view is really good to do like kind of changes. So imagine I wanted to change this name of this track. I want to change it from adoption to adoption and governance. So I would need to create that once. I kind of click off of it. I would then copy it, and then I could just simply copy that all the way down. There we go. That change was real simple. I could make it in bulk, and then I would exit the grid view. The grid view is used for editing your list information. In addition, you also have custom views, which you can add in SharePoint and Surface in Teams. A custom view, again, if I go to all items and I go back to my list, here's my list view, but you will notice that it's organized on the session title as opposed to, let's say, speaker A to Z. Now, I can always do an A to Z view through the column, but what I want to do is I want to make this A to Z view permanent. So I've created one that I can then apply to my list by default. And if I wanted to make it default, I can do. Where would you actually build those views? You would actually build them within SharePoint itself. So if I go into SharePoint, into my site contents, okay, or should I say go to my list? So I'm just going to go back here a second in my list. You find the list within SharePoint, you come down to the bottom, and then you would create the view in addition to the default view that is already there. And you can create several different views depending upon how you want to look at that list. And a real benefit of this is that when you create those views, you can create them for all members of the team at the same time. So each member of the team can look at the list in the way that they want to look at it. Now, a few other actions that we can do on list items: bulk or quick edit, which, you know, I've shown you, but I'll show you again how to reorder columns and how to delete columns. So going back into our demo environment, as said, being able to edit via the grid view. If we want to edit in bulk, then what we would do is we would select at the top, which would select all of the list items. We would then select edit, and you can edit common features within those list items. So again, you know, let's say that I wanted to change the name back to adoption. I would simply set adoption, click save, and you can see that the track name has been changed back to adoption on all of the items. So when you are doing editing within list items, then use bulk and also edit within grid view. In terms of moving the columns around, you simply drag and drop. So there we go. I can drag and drop them within Teams. Alternatively, click on the column title, go to the column settings, and then you can move right or move left. So you have actions in order to be able to do that. Deleting the columns. This is really simple too. Let's say I want to delete this column 8, or let's say I wanted to delete, sorry, not the row, the column. So let's say I want to delete this column, which was, let's say, the moderator. I would click on that column. I would go to column settings. I would go to edit, and then we have the delete button. So the column will be removed and the data will be permanently. So you do have to watch when deleting column. If you delete the column, all the data within it will be permanently removed. One other thing I would say about columns whilst we're here is take advantage of the formatting. So if I go into the column settings, okay, and formatting, I can use formatting on those columns. So for example, if I wanted to put colors on the column in order to make them visually distinctive. So conditional formatting on the columns is really recommended to create these rich lists within Microsoft Teams. And finally, this is something that's specific to Teams is putting comments, and this is a great example of how the team can work collaboratively on list items. We might want to review the item within the team. We could have ideas around that list item, or we could have, issues with that list item that we need to talk it out with the team. We can do that by starting a discussion on the list item. Really easy to do. I select my list item. I then come to conversation up in the top right hand side, and as you will see there is my conversation, and that conversation doesn't have to stay here where the list item is. If I go to post, you can see there that the conversation is really moved into the conversation of the team. So if I put a reply here, did you read this? I can go back to my list, go back to my item, go to my conversation, and there we go. There it is. So comments and ability to collaborate on those list items, really, really useful. In terms of demos and alerts, alerting can be set up on lists, but you can only do this within the web app currently. So let's say that you're the owner or the list, or the person that is the largest stakeholder. You may want to see changes on that list when new items are added, when existing items are modified, or when items are deleted, and then get an email and notified when that has been changed. The alerted functionality is only within the web app experience. So if I go to the web app experience and I go to click more options, you will see this here called options alert me and manage my alerts. Click on alert me. I want to be notified, for example, by email. You can also do it via text message too. On alert, be alerted to all changes and send me an alert when anything changes, and I want that immediately. You can set it if it's a list that's being changed regularly. I wouldn't recommend that option. I would recommend a daily summary or a weekly summary, but I would call that alert title something like core demo 2 changes, and then click OK, and then manage my alerts will show you. There we go. Then the alerts are set up. So when something changes, I'm going to know about it. It might be something that it's a change that I've wanted to see. It might be that I might need to step in and say, hey, look, we might need to roll back to what that was previously. So that's alerting. Not available today in Teams, but you can set those alerts on the web app experience for changes that you make within Teams. Last but not least, I wanted to show you a little bit about the extending Microsoft Lists, which with the Power Platform, and this can be used in conjunction with Teams. So this is using both Power Apps and Power Automate along with lists and surfacing that within Teams. With Power Apps, you can only do this today through the List web app, but it is coming with Project Oakdale in the future. So once that comes into Teams, you'll be able to do this within Teams. But today you can only do this within the List web app. So if I go to the List web app now and I click on Power Apps and I create an app, this will use my list as a gallery within my Power App. So you can see that the Power App is creating there, is getting things ready. It's going to go into the Power Apps editor. So it takes a little while in order to be able to set up, but it's worth waiting for. Now, just whilst that's getting ready, I'm going to show you the other functionality. It might be here. 2 seconds. There we go. See, this is really, really quick. No, I'm going to jump on. I'll come back to that in a minute. So we're going to come back and see our list being part of a Power App, which can then be surfaced into Teams. But with Power Automate, this is building flows to connect lists to other services via the Flow app. And we can do all of that within Teams. So I'm just going to give you an example here. And look, there is our app with Power Apps. But I'm going to move on. I'm going to be talking about Flow. So I want to set up a flow. So if I come back to my list, I want to set up a flow whereby if a new item is added, I want the team to be notified about it. So the alerting that we saw earlier, that was very much kind of personal and that I would find out, but I want the team to know when there is a new item that's been added to this list. And I can do this within Flow. So if I click on Flow and open this within Teams, this will open the Flow app. I've already created the flow prior to this session. So here we go. Here's my flow. So I've called it list item add flow. So when we add a list item, it will notify the team. And this is a very, very simple flow. So when an item is created, I put the site address in. So there we go. That's the site address. And I from the URL of the web app. I then have my list name. I then, so when an item is created, that's a SharePoint trigger, and then post a message as the flow bot to a channel. So what I then do is I then have the information from the list, and I've used a bit of HTML, as you can see there, that makes it look nice. So when I add an item to the list, that's going to come up and a message is going to be posted in the general channel within my team. That's going to show me the title of that session, the track, the date and the time, and the speaker. Let's go and have a look about this. So I'm going to go into my demo list. I'm going to go and add an actual item. So here we go, Teams adoption session 9. Going to enter a date and time. Just going to put that today. The track is going to be adoption. The speaker is going to be Adam. The moderator is going to be Chirag. The join link, https teamsnation.online/room1. And then I could add an image. I'm going to add an image. And then I click save. So I've saved that new list item. I'm going to come to my flow. I'm going to edit that flow. I'm just going to run a little test. I'm going to perform the trigger action and I click test. So that'll now be running. And that's what it looks like. Here's the outcome. So my team are going to be notified when that list item is added. I know this demo has been very, very short, but I hope that you can see the power, the power of the possibilities. This is one with flow. You could add more flows when items are removed or when items are being modified, for example. And we'll go back about how we have used that list as the basis for our Power Apps. Really, really powerful possibilities. Recommendation, get hands-on, test, and get creative. See what you can do. So summing up, bringing lists into teams. Firstly, is simple. We can easily create our lists. We can easily manage our lists. It's all about how we can share and we can track within the team. Secondly, by bringing lists into the team, we can keep everyone in sync with the adds, with the changes, with the removals to that list. Again, we're working on things collaboratively. And last but not least, bringing lists into teams is flexible. We can customize our list to our business needs. So if we think about all of those scenarios, those use cases that we've seen over the course of this session, lists are going to become quite an essential part of teams and channels that we work in. So what's next? Teams is enabled. This was enabled in September with the mobile app. As we said earlier, it's in public beta, which is now available for iOS. There is the link there should you want to participate in the public beta. In terms of the roadmap, we have rules that are coming for list items. These are if this then that arguments. That's supposed to come in later this month, but more than likely has slipped back into November. In terms of the views, we mentioned during the session that in addition to grid and gallery view, we will also have calendar view that will make our lists even richer than they are now. We'll see offline working coming to lists at the end of 2020. So at this moment in time, you can have teams offline, but if you try to access lists, you won't be able to. That lists only work currently online. So that offline working, being able to continue building your lists even though you're offline, that'll be coming by the end of the year. The ability to undo and redo actions, this is a really important one. If you make a change, then you can't go back. In addition, you can't go forward earlier if you've gone back. So the ability to undo and redo on lists and list items is going to be an awesome add. And then mentions in the list items, so the ability to mention in the comments, that's going to be coming. All three of them are going to be coming by the end of the year. So as I said, you know, there's really rapid development. The experience is changing really, really fast. So returning to the outcomes, we looked at what Microsoft Lists is. It's an app that in Microsoft 365 that helps us track and organize our work. It helps us create and manage lists, not only in a web app experience, but also in Teams and on our mobile. We have to consider where our data is when we create those teams. We have to think about the prerequisites we need to use them in the web app, in Microsoft Teams, and on the mobile device. And as well, we need to think about how they are being surfaced into Microsoft Teams. Then we looked at the how. So how do lists and teams work together? We looked at a whole load of things. We looked at how to initialize lists, how to create them. We looked at how to share them, how to manage them. We looked at how to export them, how to delete, how to recover. We digged a little bit into the list items themselves, so how we can use filters and how we can use different kinds of views. We looked at how you can move and delete columns. We then looked at finally what's next. We had a very quick view at that roadmap. So just a reminder, this was a level 100 to 200 introductory session. We did focus on Teams as opposed to the core web app experience. And just to keep in mind that development, those items that are coming down the line, really, really effective. It's going to get even better than it is today. But of course, everything that you see should still be valid, but it may change and the experience may change just because things kept are in perpetual development, as it were. So that's the end of the session. I hope you really enjoyed it. Lists and teams are two applications that I'm so passionate about within Microsoft 365. Again, I'd like to thank the organizers, Adrian, Juan Carlos, and Ferran, for inviting me along again. I would like to thank our sponsors for being able to make this happen. I've really enjoyed the experience again. So thank you very much. Here are my contact details. If you have any questions after this session or anything you can think of, please feel free to reach out to me. My website, microsoft365pro.co.uk. You can get me on Twitter at Microsoft365pro, or link up to me on LinkedIn and ask the questions that way. So I'd like to thank you ever so much for coming along to this session. There is so much still left to go, so I really hope you enjoy your day. I really hope you enjoy catching up on all of the content on demand, and I wish you the very best for using Microsoft Lists and Microsoft Teams together. Take care.